This is literally going to transform your life.
And what I love about belief coding is there's a process. It's really clear and easy to follow.
I've had many forms of therapy, and this is definitely by far one of my go-tos. So if it's for anything else, I'm not even using it for my business, I'm using it for me, to heal myself, to work through blocks, to build that sense of self-awareness.
You know, trauma isn't always with a capital T. It doesn't have to be huge and big. There's more little T traumas in our lives that make us who we are, and buried in those traumas are a set of belief systems.
Just taking part in the process has changed the way that I view everything that I do.
It's just been such an adventure. I think the person I ended up helping the most so far is myself, which is not what I was expecting.
The energy and the love and the support absolutely found my tribe.
It's amazing. You're going to transform your life and every single person that you use belief coding on, one belief at a time.
Hello and welcome to the Love, Peace, Truth, Karma podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Brown, and today I've got the beautiful Julie Colquhoun. Julie is an entrepreneur and is so passionate about helping people stand in their truth, spreading awareness of the corruption of the world and protecting children at all costs. Enjoy the podcast.
If you're in China, you just know it's corrupt. They want it to be like that here.
People are pretending to be 12-year-old kids, mate, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're 40-year-old men.
Now we're getting bombarded with all these death numbers, but there's no context there.
He'd got one child pregnant, he'd raped many others, and we had evidence to prove that.
Do you think evil still exists today as it did back then? And the answer should very simply be yes.
Julie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so grateful that you've come on. For me, you were somebody who I watched and looked up to during this. I don't even want to say pandemic or say pandemic or whatever, but it was seeing you in your car, getting on your rants, and you just did it so eloquently and. I'm sure like you know, when you see things and you can't unsee them and everything just seems so obvious to everybody. And the way you were describing things when you were trying to reach out to people, it was just like, how can other people not see that? I was obviously doing the same things, but you were somebody who I'm sure a lot of people were grateful for because so many felt like they were going insane, and I'm sure you had a lot of feedback. What was the feedback from the people that you were following you or your friends and family when you started to speak out?
Well, thanks, first of all, for letting me be here and speak out even more, because like you, I'm super, super passionate and continue to be. So thank you for what you do as well, because, you know, it is that thing of trying to connect as many people with as many dots as we can. And the feedback that I really did get was, it's just nice to hear it from like a normal mum or a mum who is just saying it as she sees it and saying it in my language. Yeah. Because there were a lot of podcasts, there were a lot of things from scientists and stuff trying to explain, which we're all grateful for, but equally being able to translate that feeling inside of how this is making us feel, and other people going, that's how I feel, and not feeling in the minority is probably the best feedback. So I kind of did it from my car or from my living room, and people used to say to me, I just felt like I was in the car with you chatting, or I felt like I was in your living room when you sat on your sofa with a cup of tea, and that feeling of connection, which is what I think people felt they lacked during this period.
Yeah, it's because you just shown so much vulnerability and rawness and realness, and I think that's why people related to it so much, because you were just speaking from your heart. And something that obviously I'm very passionate about is what you spoke a lot about is the children. And I know you've got 2 boys that are older, aren't they? How did they react to you speaking out?
They weren't that keen. They weren't keen. They're 19 and 23. So that thing of like, oh my gosh, like mum is exposed, their friends are going to see me, or, you know, that type of thing. But in the end, actually, they were really proud because, you know, as a role model, as a mother, you want them to always feel that they can vocalize what's going on for them. And I think we live in a society where it's getting harder and harder to vocalize our opinions without being bashed in some way, shape or form that we're offending someone. And that's a whole different topic we may or may not touch on. But so, you know, for them to kind of see my truth and to deliver it, and for people to appreciate, you know, them, and I'm sure you get them, so many messages from all over the world of appreciation and people you get to help. You know, in the end, they were good with it. But the whole topic that I was talking about was more of a conflict within our home.
Yeah, and what about the big V word? Like, did any of them think about having it, or were they, you know, are they married? We've got partners?
No. They're both at home with me. They're going
Mummy's
nowhere.
Boys.
They're not going anywhere. So they were very, you know, I've raised them to have their own strong opinions, right? I wanted them to be these human beings. So they were very much like, we're adults, we can do what the hell we want. Of course they can. Their body, their choice. Is that not something that I promote? So, you know, that was thrown back at me. But the mother in me was so protective. And, you know, for any parent out there, you know, it doesn't matter how old your kids get, you know, your own mother said that to you when you were growing up. And just that thing of like, to me, they're still babies. They can't make that decision. And I just wanted them to explore the opposite narrative. I just wanted, and that's kind of the passion that comes out in the lives, is just go and listen to the opposing argument that's not being allowed on mainstream media. You need to open up. And they didn't want to listen to me because what kid listens to their parents, right? Like, I know nothing. But they did explore the narrative, the opposing narrative outside of the mainstream news, and came to their own conclusions that this was probably something they did need to hold off. But my youngest one, 19, so he turned 18 during the first year of the lockdowns.
So did my Hallie, actually.
Yeah, they're exactly the same age. And so that was really challenging and really difficult, because it was that kind of, you know, that wonderful age, and, you know, all his mates were getting it, and then they're talking about holidays together when they can travel and stuff. And so for him, it was harder for me to stave him off. He definitely thought about it for a few times.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? There's so much peer pressure that's being created, especially among young people, and even like in schools when they've been showing like news round, even now with like the war that's going on, they're showing like children from 5 years old, like things that are going on in the world, which it doesn't concern them. It's constantly fear projecting. But ultimately, your boys must have listened to you, even though they didn't listen to you directly of what was coming out of your mouth. Excuse me. It's what I've learned with my girls is they may not listen to the words that you're saying directly to them, but they watch what you're doing, and they take that on board, and they act accordingly, because you know they you know, it's being a role model, isn't it? Being that role model without realizing it. You know, if you tell a child to do something, they're not going to do it. But if you show them by being that person and doing the right thing, then they're obviously going to take that on board. Yeah, with my Hallie, I was so proud of her. You know, she was at college, and she was obviously listening to things and seeing the things that I was posting, and she educated her teacher on a couple of occasions. There was most of her friends had it, and the people at college. There was a few at college, but now she's gone to uni. The majority of them have had it. I think there's only a couple of them that haven't. But the teacher was sort of asking people, like asking the students how they felt and if anybody had it. And she said no, she wasn't having it. And then he said why, and she then reeled off all these things and saying about the statistics and that it was in its trial period. And he was writing things down because he was, are you sure about that, Hallie? And they're totally unaware. And that's what is just so mind-blowing about all this, the level of ignorance, really, isn't it? I mean, I'm guilty of it, though, as well, from the past. I immunised. Did you immunise your boys? Yeah, I did. But do you know what? It's funny you say that, because I remember when Hamish, my eldest, he's 23 now, 24 this year, I felt off about it. I remember it was the whole MMR thing. And I remember just going, there was a bit of stuff around at the time of this being quite dangerous. Maybe is it linked to autism and this and that? And
And there wasn't Google, there wasn't the places to go check. And I was again in the minority in the nursery school. You know, I was that mum, you know, like, what are you worried about? Don't be so ridiculous. And I just remember going, I don't feel very comfortable. And I even remember vividly the day I took him, because I just knew in my heart I didn't want him to have it. But a family, my ex-husband's auntie was a GP. She got on the phone to me. You know, she knows best, right? And she convinced me to give it to him. And, you know, like you, I'm sure you live with some small regret, even though because of what you know now.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I thought I was being a good mum.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's how some of the mums feel now, giving them this.
Yeah. I do the Divine shows, you know, the Iconic Divine, and we had a lady on from the People's Health Alliance yesterday. I would like to get them on here, actually. They're launching a database to try and connect GPs with practitioners with patients because of the lack of the failings of the NHS now. It's everyone's struggling to get appointments and be seen, and but also, so they are creating they've got a vaccine injury claim department because obviously the yellow card system is failing, but also they are enabling the NHS to be held accountable for their, you know, a management position, not a staff position. What's your views on the NHS, you know, at a lower level? Because for me, I personally, I feel like, a lot of this is why I brought this subject up, because you were saying about the GP got on the phone to you and persuaded you to give them jabs to your boys. But was she doing it from a place of being fully educated and fully informed, or was it just a case of her being drummed into her that they were safe and effective and it was what you were supposed to do? Because when I've heard so many times now, people that do challenge GPs and nurses that are giving these immunisations to children, they are completely unaware of the ingredients, the injuries that have been caused, you know, what's harmful to the child and what can actually happen, and they're just only told that they're safe and effective. So for me, I think as a nurse or as a GP, they have a level of responsibility to understand this fully before they're injecting some sort of substance into a child or any other human being. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was very kind of like the statistics against autism. So that was really all she brought up, was like, well, it's only 1 in, I can't even remember what the statistic would have been. It wasn't weighing up the ingredients and what that actually had as an effect on the body. So I think that that's an interesting, there's an interesting thing. So it wasn't really, and I was one of those mums that did go down a bit of a washable nappy route and was, you know, buying organic veggies and pureeing it. And I was a little bit considered alternative, you know, considering I lived in suburbia. Do you know what I mean? And I was kind of doing that stuff because I kind of was waking up to the effects of, but I'd previously had ME, something I didn't tell you when we spoke. You know, I'd previously, when I was 24, had ME. And so it was through seeking a great acupuncturist who started to educate me on what we're putting into our body. And, you know, I've got mercury fillings and all of those things. So
what do you think caused that? Did you get to the root of the cause of it?
Yeah, there was a build-up of lots of things. I had childhood tonsillitis like every single year, so I was having antibiotics every single year. So poor, weak immune system growing up, you know, because they just kept giving me more and more and more. I'm a child of the 70s, so it was normal to rock up and say, you need a filling. Right? For no apparent reason, you were just a mouthful of mercury fillings. And then my mum died when I was 20. So that was it was a shock. She died very suddenly from cancer. And that was a shock and sort of, you know, so a culmination of kind of depression, weak immune system, toxic overload. And my body just went, I've had enough. I'm done, you know. And so that was like a real amazing education 26 years ago, because, you know, forced to sort of be in bed and have no Google, to get a diagnosis that had ME. So I had to go down the alternative route because nobody was giving me answers. And I sure as hell wasn't staying in bed and not going out with my mates. That was like not happening.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? At 24. So that was kind of my thing. So I think that led then on to when I had my babies, that I had that insight of what you put in your body has an impact. And I think, from going back to your original question, the guidelines I was giving is it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. And it only causes this in this number of children in potential link to autism. And really, that wasn't the question. And I should have gone back and said, what's the list of freaking ingredients in this stuff?
Yeah.
And what's the long-term damage? What's the long-term damage to the body? But I wasn't quite fully awake to all of it, really, I don't think.
And I think the statistics have obviously been not being correct because of the people that are unaware of them or being told. That's on my throat today. The throat chakra's blocked. The people that have been told that, oh, it's nothing to do with the vaccines that they've been giving the children. There's so many that go undiagnosed through, the vaccine injury because they're led to believe that it has nothing to do with it. But as a mother, you intuitively would know, wouldn't you? Your child's okay 1 minute and they have a vaccine and then they're not. So it's obvious. But you're going back to the acupuncture, you said, which is obviously working on the meridians of the body and so I suppose tapping into that spiritual side. So is that where did that sort of open up any a wider perception of alternative healing to you then? Was that sort of what led you on to more of a spiritual journey, or have you always been spiritual?
I've always been kind of spiritual, because when I say spiritual, I went to Sunday school growing up, but I didn't come from a spiritual or religious family. It was just my parents shoved us off to Sunday school because it meant they got 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon without their kids. Like, that was like, go to the local Sunday school. Genius. But it did, give me a broader perspective, and I went to a really lovely church. I had a really lovely experience as a child and Christianity, and definitely felt the spirit, so to speak, and things. It was very evangelical church. So, very sort of, high vibes, let's say. And so that was a really lovely experience as a sort of a teenager. And then kind of when my mum died, I sort of broke free of all of it, because I was in a bit of a strange territory with how I felt about everything. But I did believe my mum had gone to a different place. My dad's testimony as she passed was really interesting. And then he was with his own dad when his dad passed, and it was a similar story, which I can or cannot share depending on time. But it really strengthened that there was this other realm or other place, and I felt
dimension.
Very at peace. Dimension, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly the right word. So I felt very at peace at that, but I didn't tap into it. I was still very close, I think, to all of it. But even as a really young child, gosh, so much I didn't actually tell you when we were on the phone. As a young child, I used to have out-of-body experiences, levitate and all of that stuff. And I never used to tell anyone, because you don't want to be the freak. So that used to happen to me. And then just as you get older, it kind of stopped happening. And
so I think that many of us have that experience though. But like you say, it's something that we think, oh, that was really weird. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody. Because I remember having it and literally flying around in my nana's house and, like being, just watching everything. And it was so strange. But only now learning about astral projection and that lucid dreaming, like that's, you realize that was actually real, but we're frightened to say it. And then we just sort of lose it, don't we? Our perceptions are so wide as children when we see children that, like I've seen, did you see there was a little post on social media of a little girl? She must have only been about 2 in a graveyard, and she reached up and pointed, and then whatever it was that had come to her, and she lifted forward and pursed her lips, and it kissed her, and then she sort of waved goodbye, and it was so. And the mother was like, "Who are you talking to? What are you pointing at?" And it was, she obviously seen a spirit, isn't it?
Something.
It does exist. Yeah, we can't be closed off from it.
No, 100%. Like it is that thing. And even as an adult, you don't feel almost safe to say it to people. because if people did experience that, sometimes they've shut off to it as well. Like it, but I remember, do you remember like it being this most incredible feeling?
Yeah.
When you were floating around the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was, and I used to go to bed hoping it would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways.
Sorry, go on.
No, so my spiritual, like going back to your thing, like my spiritual journey started a lot later, like probably in the last 8 years. I was much more open to spirituality again, which we might come on to. Yeah, so I felt God was speaking to me a year before I did lives, but I was still asleep. So that was why it was incredible, because I even spoke to someone in my church and was like, got a feeling God wants me to do lives. And I like have a God voice in my left ear, and I mean, again, we can't really unpack that at the moment, but I really sensed that it was being pushed, it was being triggered. It was an internal intuitive feeling. And I sought advice over it. And I was like, well, I'm not doing them. Like, there's no way I'm going on and doing lives. Like, I'm this
having an argument with your spirit guide. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, no freaking way. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what if you're dating someone and then they see you on social media? It's just like, no, that's a horrible thing. And so I didn't want to do it. And the year went by and by and by. I'm still asleep. And then in the end, I literally say to God, I'm like, right, I'll do it in the new year. Like New Year's resolution and all that, I'll do it. It was January 4th. I remember I was in my car and had my little thing. Yeah, of course I was. It was like, because then the cats and the kids and stuff weren't going to that's why I do it in my car. There's like no distraction.
Yeah, I'm the same.
So they've all had like a warning at the moment. It's like, leave me alone. I'm on a live. And so I did it in my car and I was terrified. And I was like, that was an easy subject to come up with. And I just made this deal with God that I would do it 3 times a week. And so there was this turning point, and I still was asleep at the point of what was going on in the world. Like I was kind of going along with the narrative still. I wasn't abiding by any of the rules, but I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of going to go away. And what was interesting was I would find something I thought would be interesting or engaging to an audience, and about anything. And I would always get a message afterwards from somebody that I hadn't spoken to or seen. And it would always be a spiritual message. So afterwards, it would be like a lady from my church saying, I caught your live today, Julie, and I just really enjoyed it. And I was like, that feels like a message, like, because it was somebody that had never messaged me, or another, it was an old school mum that I used to sort of walk up to school with when my kids were young. And she was like, oh my gosh, Julie, I can see God working through you. I'm thinking, really? I was talking about waxing and beauty disasters. Like, how are you extracting that from my life? So I kept getting these like every single time as well. It was like no accident. I would get this very random message from somebody. And I was like, okay then. And then one morning, what was happening hit. I was finally awake. I'd watched some Yeed and stuff and Sherry Tenpenny and all of that stuff, and I knew inherently I wasn't going to have this thing, and I researched why and opened up like so many of us, these rabbit holes, and was like, and I think everyone has that kind of moment where you understand there's no going back, there's no unseeing, the world really isn't the place you thought it was, and it kind of culminates.
The red pill moment.
Yeah, the red pill moment. And I woke up, and even my boys came into me and were like, what's wrong? And it was just, I was just absolutely streaming that day. I just woke up, I was crying for the world. It was, and like you said, I just knew they're coming for the kids. And that's given me shit chills saying it. I knew in every cell and fiber of my body, they were going to come for these kids. And I just knew it. And at the time it was like, oh, the over 50s, the vulnerable. And I was like, no. They're coming for these kids, and it's evil and it's wrong and it's going to harm. And any adult can, their body, their choice, whatever, but don't touch those children. Just don't. I feel like I might cry. It was that strong in me. And in that moment, I knew I had to speak out and I had to say something, even if it was like to one person. You know, it's that thing of like, if one child doesn't get it because I bothered to speak out, then it has to be worth it. But I was concerned, yeah.
So it's more like, so it's like, you know, when you talk about you felt like you got your messages from God, I mean, there's so many people that, well, they call it different things, whether it's a spirit guide or, you know, do you feel like you have multiple spirit guides, or do you think when your messages, obviously you're saying that from God, or it's your, you know, there's so many people that I'm opening up to, and with Jessica Cunningham, I do the retreats with Jess, and she always talks to spirit, and she believes that everybody has the ability to do it, which would make sense because it's them messages from that higher realm, isn't it? From your higher self as well, that's intuitively coming to you. It was almost like it was prepping you for the big moment. So the lives were, and the messages to keep going, and then when it hit, you were already doing it, so it was just came to you so naturally. So yeah, I do believe that everybody can tap into that if they're open to it, and like you say, it is just widening your perception of that there is other dimensions out there. I believe there's multiple dimensions, but there is like a higher realm that's trying to help us. But if we're not listening, we don't see them signs and the messages, then we never will we? So yeah, going back to the children, I mean, now they're still offering the jab they're doing it from 5 to 12-year-olds
5 to
now,
11.
aren't they?
Yeah,
5 to 11s. It is disturbing that now, of all the evidence and everything that is now coming out, and the fact that it's like it's not disappeared, because I feel like the people that have had the jabs are the ones that are suffering now, aren't they? I can't tell you how many people. My mum was at my house the other day, and she got a phone call from my auntie and saying, 2 people that they know have dropped dead, and somebody else has got a heart, someone with a problem with the heart. My auntie's fellow has got having problems with his heart. He's had 3 or 4 of them, and he's ex-military, so he's been like telling my mum to shut up. My mum's totally on board with everything, telling my mum to be quiet. She doesn't know what she's talking about, and now he's got problems with his heart. And what gets me is they don't want to relate it, because they have so much cognitive dissonance that it's harder for them to accept it, isn't it? Which is frightening.
I think one of the things that really alarmed me, and I know that you and I could talk all day about all the stuff going on with kids outside of just the V.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, when they lowered when they changed the Gillick competency, when they allowed children to make a decision for themselves from 12, that was when people should have been up in arms. Whether they agreed with the vaccine or not, that was when parents should have been concerned. Like, outside of anything else going on in the world, 12-year-olds, are not equipped to make medical decisions truly for themselves. And there's obviously an evil agenda around that. But that was a big pivotal moment for me as well, understanding the evil at work in this and the hand in it.
And the risk v benefit for the children as well. Well, it was the actual mind control of you doing it to protect Granny, and that's what was so disturbing to me.
And they knew peer pressure was and they'd made their lives so awful in school. They'd made their lives so difficult. Of course, they were going to go, well, I'm going to pick it over my mum because I want to, run around with my mates at lunchtime. I mean, that's the level that they played the hand with the kids. It was sick. Like, I'm passionate about that. It was really bad. And if parents didn't in that moment wake up to that kind of, oh, look, they've lowered that. But they didn't seem to care, or they didn't seem to know, or whatever. So that was that bracket. And then, I know, and they're going to come from birth. It's like 100% what they're going to come for. And we also know all the, at the moment, people don't even seem to know it's on emergency damn use. I mean, it's on emergency use. Where's the emergency?
Yeah.
There is no emergency. It's just been prolonged for another 6 months. There's no emergency. That should have everyone up in arms. Yeah. But it's specifically to get to these children. And then once it's authorized for children, then they get out of any level of compensation, like for injury.
Yeah. So going to talking about the children, and it's like you say, it's not just about the V's. It's a lot deeper than that, isn't it? I mean, I know you've opened the can of worms where Disney's concerned, and the sex education that is now in schools, and this trans movement that they're infiltrating young people's minds, and not even just like teenagers, going into schools of like kids that are 5 years old. Somebody told me yesterday that they went into a school and they said they were doing some sort of production or play or something, where the people that were doing it were going to come in and they were going to strip off completely, and I don't know what it was around. I don't know if it was, they were 5 years old. They were 5 years old and they were doing a play where they were naked. And have you seen the clip where I think it was in a different country, but the adults come out and they were naked, and the children are like, must be like 7, 8, 9, all sitting there looking at these people that are all naked, teaching them how to pleasure themselves in this new sex education. It's just, where do we, what gets me is that how this is just being slipped under the rug, and people aren't in uproar about it, but yet they're scrambling around to be virtual signaling about Ukraine and Russia, but their own children that are having this put to them in their schools, they're silent about it. It just blows my mind, which is why your children are at school, but that's why I've took my girls out of school, because I just cannot have them in that indoctrination anymore. Thankfully, I'm in a position to do that, and I know many people aren't because they work. But it is starting to, people are starting to pull children out and start a different educational system, start different schools, thankfully, that hopefully will continue to grow. So I know you've posted about the Disney stuff, which, doesn't it make you sick? All the things that our children have watched and we've been totally oblivious to. It's like you said, once you take the pill and once you see, you just can't unsee, can you?
It's vile. I think what needs to be done is we need to empower parents to be able to openly, and this is one of the biggest problems we have in our society right now, is people can't have opinions, because we have this kind of new wokeism that is, if you vocalize an opinion, you offend somebody. So everyone's too frightened to offend somebody because they don't want to be labeled as something, which is why those people that speak out have kind of got past that and like, give me your worst, like call me whatever, like I don't care anymore. So I've got everything. So but this, empowering parents to understand that when something feels off, and this comes back to intuition, this comes back to our kind of, not most people really not being stepped into their intuition, their spirit, their God voice, their whatever you want to call that. And there's just so many names to that, and there's so many topics we could talk about on that. But when you get that moment inside of knowing, you need to act, you need to speak out, and you need to say, do you know what, this makes me feel very uncomfortable. Like, that's all you need to, this makes me feel very uncomfortable. I do not think schools are a place where these people have the authority on your teaching your children this stuff. I just don't. They go there to learn maths and English, let's be honest, and some other things. Like, they are not there to start educating them on pleasuring themselves or discussing whether they think they might be a different gender, or should there be pastoral care, should there be a child that maybe is having a bad time at home and or about their sexuality or anything like that, should there be a safe place that a child could go and speak? Of course, no one's saying that that's not acceptable, but for it to be taught as a subject is off and it's wrong. And I think if you ask most parents, they would agree, but most don't want to be the parent in the playground. It starts in school, and because I was always that parent in the playground. My kids didn't do homework; they went to school late every Friday because we used to go get cooked breakfast in Tesco. Because that was, and you know what? If I asked them what they enjoyed most about their childhood, going late to school every Friday. Did they get all their exams? Yes. Like, people need to chill out about the amount of learning they do in a day is very minimal. Like, people need to just, if you're homeschooling, my son didn't go to school for nearly 18 months. He played tennis, and I say homeschooled him. And listen, I didn't do anything with him. And he went back just to do his exams, and he got an A in maths, and he's got dyslexia, and he got 2 English exams. he got all his exams. They don't learn that much in a school day. And
it's it's memorizing as well, isn't it? With the exams, when you're saying about exams, it's a piece of paper with a letter on it or a grade on it. Majority of people don't actually use half the stuff they've memorized or learn anyways in school, do they? My argument is, and the reason why I've took them out is because I want them to learn more about themselves and their happiness that comes from inside of them, not because they have a new car or a new house, or it's continually externally projecting the search for happiness as an external thing, as opposed to learning about themselves and doing things like meditation and mindfulness and yoga and learning about plants that grow from the ground that heal you, as opposed to a pill from a doctor. All these things that should be educated in school. But the trans movement is. Seen a post, I know you put about the periods, about people have periods, women have periods, period, which is true, and it's the marketing and the level of advertising that is now that you can see. It's the devil is now out there. It's not even hiding, is it? And the matter of the people that was top surgery or up surgery, is it called, when they have the breast removed, and saying that it's a normal thing. That's not a normal thing. Like, there's obviously something going inside of that person that's traumatized them to believe that they have to butcher their body and cut their breasts off. That's what needs addressing here. I'm not against trans. I'm not against anybody, but I feel like there could be a deeper issue that's going on within somebody to be addressed, as opposed to just say, well, why don't you have your breast cut off and then you'll feel better? Because them feelings and them traumas are still going to be inside that person. It's not going to heal them just because they've had a piece of skin cut off their body. And it's
a really big movement. And as I keep coining it, trans is trendy. And the reason they're making trans trendy, I don't think that group understands they're being exploited.
No.
And they are being exploited for the bigger, and this is that kind of transhumanism, which is written about in Agenda 30, and it is out there. And they want a very gender neutral. That's why we've got, very emasculated men, and we've got all this stuff going on. And, it's that thing of like, how dare you say that, like a man can be more feminine. It's all that. And it's like taken away from, it's all for a bigger, it's like that. We've got men, we've got women. Now let's just make it all very gender neutral. Make it all very gender neutral.
Get rid of the family, get rid of the
getting rid of family and stuff like that, and then become very, owned by the state and all of that stuff. Like, we could just talk for hours on that. But so the trans movement is very is part of that. It's just so part of that gender neutrality, transhumanism, and so the word trans is now everywhere. Just like we've got, let's just don't get sustainability. That's another word which is everywhere. You shop on there. Oh, sustainable denim. Oh, it's sustainable. Beware of sustainable. It's like the word that becomes that trendy word is there for a reason, for a bigger agenda. And once you understand that, you see it everywhere. I hope someone does watch this and maybe is like, what is she on about? And then understands that once you say it, you see it and you can't unsee it. And these poor children are the children that are going to suffer. And I've got somebody I met online whose friend is a nurse who works within that community as a psychologist, helping people transition. And they are at the height in all of her career where the people want to change back.
Yeah, I was going to say, because this is something, it's when they're going into these schools and obviously messing with these children's minds, and they're actually pushing hormone tablets on them, aren't they? And this was a big thing that's like, it comes down to money as well, and the agenda, but also just they're making money off this product, and it's just another way of them, poisoning our children, isn't it?
Yeah.
In effect,
Yeah.
well, poisoning the minds, poisoning the body. A friend of mine took a little girl because she was quite young, and this is as well down to the hormones that are in foods and things that I don't know about you, but obviously I've got girls and I feel like they are so young, developing from when I was younger or my mum was younger. And she took her to the doctors and said like, oh, you know, is there anything wrong? And they wanted to give her steroids or some sort of hormone tablets, and she was like, no. And that's how easy it's again another GP. It starts with the GP pushing something that they actually really probably haven't researched. It's just, again, it's big pharma. Big pharma have probably gone into the GP surgery, said, you know, selling the product, because that's what it's about. It is a medical industry, isn't it? It's not to keep you healthy, it's to keep you sick.
The only time, if you think about it, this is what I kind of like say to people, like when you get to the end of it, like you're ill, or, you know, I've been through menopause and I had periods of that where it's just like, I wanted to do it all naturally. And there were times I was on the phone to the doctor, like, give me what you got. Like, I can't cope anymore. Like, you're normally at a point of either pain or you just can't cope with it anymore, whatever, right? When they prescribe you something, you open that box and most people get out and look at the side effects, and usually they're horrendous. Like, they are like what people, and then you go, do I really need this? I don't know if I really need this. Like, most people take chemo or things last resort, right? They know it's poison. They know it's toxic. They know that it's last resort. This could be my only chance or whatever. Don't even get with that. We could do a whole other podcast on that. But it amazes me that people then have slipped from should be last resort, right? It should be a last resort reason, because if you look at the side effects and ingredients of anything, you wouldn't really want to put that in your body. So you're kind of like, no, I'm in so much pain, give me the epidural, you know, or whatever. It's like, give me it. So, you know, it's that sort of thing. But now it's become, when did that power shift? When did it become alternative to not have it? That seems bonkers. Surely it's alternative to take poison. Yeah. It's like, come on, parents, you know, like empower yourselves to understand that it's, you know, but I've got so many, I've done a whole live on cancer, and I know we're going off into a whole nother topic, but it is the people and my mother died of cancer, but the push for the drugs is like proper salesman. Like, you will die if you don't have this. That's how much it's pushed on people. Yeah. And that is a scary time we're living in. And like you said, bringing it back to the children and the hormone drugs, they are just pushing anything into their bodies. And that's where parents need to empower themselves and start saying, actually, I need to start listening to my intuition. I need to start adulting. And I need to start understanding I know best for my child. And actually, I'm not going to listen to these so-called experts that usually are educated from the pharmaceutical companies in the first place.
Yeah. Definitely.
And when you understand that, it opens another whole Pandora's box, really.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I had a friend of mine, Sophie, on here, who actually cured herself she had secondary cancer in her liver and fasted for 10 days, went back for the scan before she was having the surgery to remove it, and it had completely gone. I mean, that's how powerful the educate, because obviously she had a pancreatic tumour, which was removed first. And then when she was in hospital, they were just giving her crap food. She was borderline diabetic. They were offering her like cakes, and thankfully she took it upon herself to have her own food brought in and completely alkalize herself. But this is, the majority of people would go into hospital and just be assuming that what you get given in hospital is for the best benefit of yourself, but they will individually cater for different people that need different dietary requirements. And that's where you're saying it goes back to, it's a hospital is it really to get you better, or is it just to keep you reliant on the system, basically?
It's really worrying. And during this whole, you started with it, so we can kind of sort of wrap it up a little bit in the sense of the whole pandemic. One of the whole things was, if you don't get this B, this vaccine, then you're gonna like be mopping up, you're gonna be causing all this stress on our hospitals. And the reality was that was not the reality. And I was just like, even if you were to get this virus, so say, most people were sick at home like you always were with flu or whatever. I don't understand what this whole thing was like.
No.
What, all of a sudden, when people are really sick, I had somebody today go, "Oh, I still wear a mask because I got it and I was really ill." And I was just like, when you were really ill with flu before, did you then wear a mask?
Yeah,
no. Like,
exactly.
Where's this logic to? But that was how they sold it as well, wasn't it? That was very much how they sold it, that you would be a burden to our hospitals. And people have been healing themselves. People have been looking after themselves and being sick and being at home for as long as time.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
when did the hospitals become the be all and end all and the place of treatment? And the cancer thing is huge.
Yeah, I do want to go back to your religious side though, because I know we spoke on the phone and when you were talking about how the church has basically pushed you out now.
Yeah, a little bit.
The church that's supposed to have been, this is God who is supposed to be unconditional love and welcome all people, and unless you have a difference of opinion to the narrative, so it seems. How has that made you feel about the religious side of your life?
I remember thinking, if I speak out about this, when you speak out, you already think of the voices that you think, oh, I'm not going to speak out because this person might think this or this person might think that about me. And then to kind of be bombarded with messages from people within my church to kind of challenge me and take me on with my opinion, and not always very nicely, if I'm brutally honest. That was when I just kind of, it was like that internal thing of just knowing that I couldn't understand how they didn't get it. People of faith, these were people that were deeply spiritual people in my view, right? And they just didn't get it, and they weren't really open to that conversation.
As a child you looked up to as well, I presume.
Yeah, these are people that I have admired for many, many years, and mostly people just threw their degrees at you, or I must know more because I have a degree and
I have a memorizing grade.
So okay, keep looking at that certificate on your wall.
Yeah.
That was very difficult, but I understood the breakdown of what we're going to go through and then how we're going to rebuild. So I kind of like.
Where did you get that from? From your guide, from your messages?
Just even a feeling, not a voice specifically, just to understand, just a knowing, just a knowing, just a feeling. I
have it.
Yeah. So just that knowing, like I just knew they were coming for the kids. I didn't need evidence of that. I knew, and look, yeah, they are. So yeah, that was just a knowing, and just feeling. I feel quite bad for them. They're doing what they can, but I felt. There is an element of leadership from church, right? There is an element, and that was what initially triggered me a little bit, was there was all these leaders within churches, changing their badges on their social media as like they've just been vaccinated. I'm like, whoa, like you should have stayed very neutral. You're going to upset your congregation. Where was your discernment in that thought process? Why have you acted so quickly and so quickly from a place of significance and ego? Like that just seemed very asinine to me and very strange. And so I just observed that behavior, and I thought that was fascinating. And then it just continued. But then I was just so solid in my knowingness. I just didn't care in the end. I miss worship. I miss singing. I miss the bigger community of that stuff. But my faith has never grown more than through this period, more than I could have imagined.
Do you go to any like sister circles or do you do meditation or anything like that? Do you probably, you pray and stuff, don't you?
Yeah, I pray and I do meditation every day. Quite kind of like Christian churches don't like, some Christian people don't like meditation, as you're probably aware. And I do transcendental meditation, so that's even more like taboo in Christianity. But it works for me. I love it. And I found God came back to me years ago when I started meditating. That's how God found me. Like I literally was coming out in prayer, coming out of meditation, like deep prayer, and all these amazing things were happening to me, which I can't go into now. And And that was how I ended up going back into church, because I knew that was where I needed to be. It was
Are you talking about the light language that you were telling me about?
Oh no, that came kind of after I went back into church.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Do you know what, Leanne? I've got to watch the time. I've got to do a training call at 10.
Oh yes, I know you have. I know you have.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. But I could definitely come on and do another talk on that.
Okay. Well, just quickly tell us about the light language, your experience with that, because this is something that has been spoken about quite a lot, and I've was saying to you that I want to be able to understand it and learn it, but they call it speaking in tongue, don't they, in the church?
Yeah, in church it's speaking in tongues. So in the Bible it says that, and everyone has access to spiritual gifts, which is why I think is interesting. People don't want people meditating and all that stuff, because I really believe this is where people can tap into their spiritual gifts. So in the Bible, people get spiritual gifts, and there are people within my church and stuff that can speak in tongues. And I always thought it was cool. Like, I'm not eager from an ego perspective. I thought this is so cool. Like, it's a visible sign you've been given a spiritual gift. You know, if you say it's prophecy, like, people can go, yeah, she's prophesying, but it might not happen. Like, this is a physical gift you've got from God, right, that people can witness. It's totally ego driven for me. So I was like, God, why can't I speak in tongues? Like, why? Like, I'm super spiritual. Like, we're good, you know, like, why am I got that gift? And it kind of bothered me slightly, but, you know, mildly went off. And yeah, and so I'd ask the question. So our questions always get answered, whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
And
people need to know that they need to ask. You need to connect. Yeah.
It's like, God, like, I would like that. It was like not a deep prayer. You know, God, I want to speak in tongues. It was like, hey, you know, like one day I was on a different note. One day my dad was storing his car here, and it's got flat tires and it needed to just be towed off. It wasn't worth anything, but he was trying to keep it as a bit of a classic. Anyway, I literally had that thought. I was like, I need to get rid of that car. And then, like, literally 2 days later, someone knocked on the door, like, you know, those people with a van going, hey, give you 50 quid to tow that car away. And I'm just like, genius, brilliant. You know, like, it's like, you know, because I didn't give it too much energy, but it was like, boom, I've got this thought. So with speaking in tongues, what happened was, it was a New Year's Eve, if you want me to share that. And I didn't know where I was going to go. I just wasn't in the mood for New Year's. I had a few invites locally, and about 10 o'clock, I decided I was just going to stay in, and I was going to pray with God at midnight. It was like this new plan I was going to have at 10 o'clock. So I watched the fireworks on telly with my son. 5 minutes later, come upstairs and literally just decide I'm going to, like, light a candle, get on my knees, I'm going to pray. Like, I'm going to see the new year in with God, and I'm just going to go into deep prayer. And I literally sat down to pray, and then this speaking in tongues just came, and it was just such a moment. It was like God really had picked that moment of, like, you know, true clarity for me. And it was like but I know in other circles it's called light language or whatever, but it was like truly a gift, and it was like the timing was quite divine, and it was a lovely thing. But
can you still do it now then?
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of do it at any moment I need to.
Yeah. Be in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, like, no, like, I could do it now. It's just like,
really?
so appropriate to just suddenly start speaking in tongues. But yeah, so it's just like a language, like a second language you speak, if that makes sense. Like, if I could speak Spanish, I could suddenly speak Spanish now. It's always there. Yeah.
All right. So I know you're conscious of the time. I did want to talk about the water, because you sell the water filters, which is
I do. I'm into water.
So just quickly, what is the water filter?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about living water, and I sell the Enagic water ionizers because they produce antioxidant-rich water. And I knew from my health journey that antioxidants mop up free radicals, and free radicals cause disease. So having water that's not only filtered but also creates antioxidant living water, because it's got an electrical charge in it, the body really receives it and loves it. So that's kind of something that I do, and I'm super passionate about, because, you know, we're 70% water, and we need to really know what we're doing with our water and how it affects our bodies. And I think it's something that most people miss a trick on.
Yeah, it's full of poison. Like, the tap water nowadays, and it's getting worse, isn't it? So I'll let you go, because I know you've got to shoot. It's okay. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with me. And I wish you all the love, and, you know, just keep doing what you're doing, and we can only do our best, can't we? And keep speaking and standing in our truth.
Thank you so much. There's so much we covered, and I loved it, and I could have been here all day. So sorry I need to go, but thank you so much.
Thank you.